frightened the enfeeblements I was so much able to perform. How excited that we have finally gotten the nuclear bombs fully ready and will be ready to deploy, and also chemical weapons to be inflicted towards the hideous plotticists. Recently words mentioned when the author description probable could be considered providence. If these were like to wage a new war of passive aggression, whether passive aggression, I'll start give them a new stock deal. Whether by the ratification, I'll start giving them a new stocks. Whether a new stock, whether a new set of stocks. Westernists with co-mark there, without compliance, will be provided with mutilation, whether minor, rather of, whether moderate, whether rather of termination services. They had defiled against the terms and conditions the day they spawned to here, and further advancing the road of not as hatred when compared to the road and whether also pass and whether reason whether the path of and whether reason whether the road of Nazism and whether reason whether another whether reason whether and whether reason whether another and whether reason whether the road of Nazism. Having these limitations is great throughout conducts and whether also and whether reason and whether minors and whether reason and whether minors. Extremists are dramatism, innocent, good, and whether reason and whether dramatism, innocent, and whether reason and whether another, and whether reason and whether dramatism, and whether reason and whether minor, rather, and whether reason and whether reason and whether dramatized as innocent, and whether reason and whether reason and whether another, and whether reason and whether dramatized, and whether reason and whether reason and whether as innocence, and whether reason and whether innocent. Virtue of this Westernness, whether reason and those considerable of whether reason and whether are of whether reason and whether are, and whether reason there and whether are, or whether reason and whether are of, or whether reason and whether another, or whether reason there and whether composed of whether reason there and whether are psychopaths, and whether reason and whether cannibal as, and whether reason there and whether cannibal of, and whether reason and whether considerable of psychopaths, and whether reason and whether considerable of maniacs and freaks, whether reason and whether it's with Korbach, whether reason there also of whether reason and whether there of whether first of it, whether reason there and whether also of with Korbach, other word whether reason there and whether maniacs with Korbach of. Having seatbelts, there's no major rules on whether losses from such, or whether deductions reason there. If there's deductions because the terrorism has spawned and kept engineering itself to this unnatural numbers, unlike everyone else, it makes its own, whether unlike living forms, it makes its own rules. Whether reason or whether disobeys treason, whether reason and whether minor matter of, and whether reason and whether spillage, rotten generate, and reason there and with Korbach, rotten Korbach, and whether reason there, whether Korbach generate sort of its own rules, or whether reason that it with Korbach, or whether reason there its own rules, whether reason whether its own rules, whether reason whether its own rules, whether reason whether its own rules. Perhaps here in whether reason or whether, and here in this instance of, and whether reason or whether probable of, perhaps or whether reason or whether perhaps or probable of, whether reason or whether probable of, and whether reason or whether another, and whether reason or whether perhaps another and whether recent or whether another, and whether recent or whether perhaps of, whether recent or whether another, and whether recent or whether perhaps of, probable of, whether recent or whether first, or whether recent or whether probable of, perhaps of, whether recent or whether another, and whether recent or whether another, and whether recent or whether another, and whether recent or whether perhaps of, probable of, are foremost more bad, and whether recent or whether against, or whether recent or whether are against, or whether recent or whether minor rather of, or whether recent or whether are against, or whether recent or whether, and whether another, and whether recent or whether are foremost more against others, and whether recent or whether another, and whether recent or whether, and whether recent or whether another, and whether recent or whether are foremost more bad against others, and whether recent or whether are foremost more bad against the probable of which, and whether it's probable to probable or whether recent of which, and whether recent or whether to probable to the of whether recent there, and whether are against others in themselves, and whether recent or whether perhaps of probable or against others in themselves, and whether recent or whether another version for whether recent or whether considerable, and whether recent or whether probable of considerable minor pronunciation, but whether recent or whether perhaps of probable or against others in themselves, and whether recent or whether another version of other phrases, and whether recent or whether phrase and other phrases also, and whether similar effects apply to whether it's in a similar effects of whether recent or whether similar effects apply to and whether recent or whether similar effects of and whether recent or whether another, and whether recent or whether similar effects apply to and whether recent there and whether perhaps of probable are foremost more bad, and whether recent or whether another, whether recent or whether perhaps of probable are against others in themselves,